University. So, fortunately, most of them I already had lectures that I gave in college, so that I didn't have to do any extra work on them. But now my life story is a little different because I've never given a lecture on that. So that's been somewhat of a challenge, but not that big a challenge actually. What I did is I went through all these pictures I had of my childhood, and I got all carried away, and I'm remembering all these things, and I got letters from my old girlfriends and all kinds of stuff that I didn't know I had. So I've sort of been reliving my life again. This display you have here from my talk came from artificial intelligence. And I hate artificial intelligence. And they're always making suggestions, whether I like it or not, what I should do with my presentations. And they're all bad suggestions. They're all terrible. But this was good. It was a good one, I thought. So what I had on the screen was this. Just basic, print saying what it is here. And the artificial intelligence came up with this. I really like this. So this is the first time I've ever used artificial intelligence, rather than saying, what stupid thing, why would they ever do that? So anyway, here's a good example. Sometimes you do get something out of it that's interesting. So I'm going to start out today talking about some of the businesses I had when I was quite young. And this is my very first business. It was selling stamps for stamp collections. So when I was in 4th grade, stamp collecting was the thing that everybody loved to do. I'm thinking back about that now, when we have all these diversions for young people, and they can see these movies on their little cell phone that they walk around with, and the cartoons and the songs and everything else. But back in 1940, when I was in 1st grade, collecting stamps was the big thing. And everybody was all excited about that. I mean, it's amazing to me now that they were. And what you did, there was always an ad in the newspaper that if you sent a self-addressed envelope to the Mystic Stamp Company, they sent you back a stamp book, and it had a 1 cent and a 3 cent stamp. These are obviously canceled, so that you can't use them for anything. And then you tried to find the other stamps and fill the little spaces in your book. Well, probably if you hung out near a post office and went through the trash, you could find a couple of stamps. In my case, my father was in business, so they had airmails coming, and so I had some opportunity. But in general, for most people, you couldn't find these, so you had to pay the Mystic Stamp Company to send you them, and because that was what they had a lost leader by doing the initial gift to you, knowing that you would come back to them and buy these stamps. So I used 10-cent stamp cost 5 cents. Well, that's quite a bit of money for something that's just normally thrown in the trash. And back in those days, you didn't have credit cards or anything. You mailed actual money in the envelope. And you always had, for this particular company, you always had to send them a self-addressed envelope with a stamp on it. So their expenses were very small. They were really they became very profitable because they had a couple of people working in their office who were just taking these stamps, and they had to steam them off an envelope or something so that they weren't torn, and then stick them in for you. So my twin brother saw an ad in Mechanics Illustrated magazine that we got. And it turned out we were able to buy a huge carton of Nazi stamps for $2. And I looked on the internet to see if I could find pictures of them, but I couldn't. So I think what we had an extraordinary collection of German stamps. They were precision engraved. They looked just like photographs. They were just stunning to look at, and they had pictures. The low values of stamps had pictures of Adolf Hitler on them, but the ones that everybody wanted had engravings of airplanes and rockets and anti-aircraft guns and submarines and so on, and they were just like the photographs. They were just beautiful pictures. And it was really cool when you were a 6-year-old kid to have some Nazi stamps that made you a tough guy, and you could tell everybody you conquered somebody and stole their stamps from them or something. So anyway, we started this a stamp book with this collection that we had. But unlike the ones that everybody else had, where you could go to the post office and see if you could find anything, there's no way you could find anything for this stamp book. You had to buy them from us. So we had sort of a captive market, you might say, but nobody figured that out. And the next thing you know, we were selling these stamps. Now 5 cents doesn't sound like much now, but back in those days, my allowance was 6 cents a week. So that's a lot of money, and of course it's 25 times more valuable back then than it is now. So next thing you know, all these kids were coming to us, and they were paying for these stamps. And we had the stamp book just like the ones that Mystic had, where the amount of money that you had to pay. So if you wanted the picture of the tank on the right-hand side breaking through a wall and shooting at somebody, you had to pay 12 cents for that. That was probably 2 weeks of your allowance to buy that. And but next thing we knew, the parents were buying these too, because they were sending them to their friends, and it was something that they had no way of getting, and the quality of these pictures were phenomenal. So we were selling them to the parents, unbelievably. And the next thing you know, for 6-year-old kids, we're making a lot of money. We made about like $50 out of doing this. So the next year, I saw an ad in Mechanics Illustrated, and you could buy an assortment of fireworks. And I don't remember. I think we paid a lot of money. We paid probably $10 or $15 for this huge box full of fireworks. Well, what I didn't realize as a 7-year-old kid was, first of all, it was illegal to sell fireworks in Rhode Island. And even if it had been legal, back when it was legal, previously, you couldn't sell them to anybody under 18 years old. So I was selling them to 6-year-old, 7-year-old kids. And these were dangerous too. But I didn't know about these illegal things when I was 7 years old. And things I loved, we had all these wonderful things in this box. We had 70 packs of firecrackers, and we had the fountain displays where you put it on the ground and this thing shoots way up in the air and everything. And then skyrockets, really, those are wonderful. But the best thing of all were the bulldogs. They were like M80s, and they fortunately had a slow fuse, so you could light it and then get the hell out of there, because when that thing went off, it was really dangerous. In fact, what I like to do with the bulldogs is I put an empty soup can over it. And when it went off, this can would go way up in the air. And sometimes it would go straight up, but sometimes it would go up in a little bit of an angle, and then it would start flipping end over end. So I was having early training in flight dynamics, and when later on, when that became my profession, I was thinking back on it that I had actually learned as a 7-year-old kid by firsthand experimentation some of the elements of flight dynamics, and even more so on the rockets. I'll show you in a moment there. But anyway, we wanted to have a business here selling these. I mean, I wanted to sell them to my classmates, and they didn't have that much money. So we took these firecracker packages that had 20 of them in there, and normally what you did is you lit one end, and it went bang, 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 bang. We took them apart, and that was not easy because they're very fragile. We took them apart, so we had individual firecrackers, and we sold them for 1 penny each. And now the fuse burned really, really quickly in these because it wasn't a slow fuse. So I suggested that these the kids who were buying these get a lighted cigarette from their father while he's watching them and use it to light the fuse. Well, of course, none of them wanted their father watching them. They didn't want their father to even know they had a firecracker. And so what they actually ended up doing, it turned out, is stealing a cigarette from their father when he wasn't looking and then lighting it themselves. So not only was I exposing them to danger with fireworks, but I was starting their downward spiral into smoking cigarettes. So definitely not a good influence on these young people. But anyway, in the first 2 weeks, my twin brother and I had sold enough fireworks to pay the entire cost of the carton that we'd got from the Banner Fireworks Company. So we're already on now 100% profit on everything we did. And the word had gotten out that you could buy fireworks from this little kid in Barrington, Rhode Island. And here's the address, and so on. Well, next thing I knew, there were a lot of older kids in my yard waiting for me to come home from school. And on the weekend, there were teenage boys and even some adults there, and they were buying all the skyrockets and everything. It was the only place in Rhode Island you could buy fireworks from my house. And so I raised the price of the bulldogs. Supply and demand here. I could see the demand was high. And so I was getting 50 cents each for these things. And I was also experimenting with them, again, flight dynamics. But one of the things that one of the adults actually who bought some from me showed me a little trick that he loved. He attached his bulldog to a stone. He lit the fuse. He threw it in a pond. He took me over to his house, which was the next street over, and threw it in a pond. And then it went under the water, and of course it went off under the water. And next thing you know, all these fish are floating on the surface. And he had a net, and he went over and he got all these fish. So it was a new way to go fishing. Well, I felt sorry for the fish, so I never did this myself. And I never could fish either because I always, when I'm taking the hook out of this guy, I'm thinking, oh, Jesus, oh, no, I'm killing this guy. Anyway, but that was an eye-opener to me about these things that actually burn underwater, and that the water was incompressible, not like air. So it transmitted the force very powerfully over to these poor fish. And of course, you could put the bulldog under an empty soup can, and when it went up, I didn't know it was go straight, and I was analyzing that. But particularly with skyrockets, I would take mine down to the shore. We lived right on the about 50 yards from the river, the Barrington River, and I'd aim them out at the river by sticking them in a bottle, and then light the fuse. And most of them would go out over the water, but some of them would turn around and come back and fly into somebody's yard. Fortunately, I was never around to claim ownership of them. And the reason why I realized is a 7-year-old kid was the aerodynamic axis was different than the thrust axis of the skyrocket. And you can see these 4 rockets here. If you look at the one on the right, it's not coming straight into the tube where the aerodynamic part of this thing. So one would like that, you'd light it and it would go right out. It would initially, of course, go where you aimed it. And then once it got some velocity, now the aerodynamic forces are acting on it. And it would start coming back right at you. That was exciting. And again, early observations in flight dynamics, and that became my career. So, I was getting early experience experimenting with these factors. Well, anyway, I made the mistake of selling the firecracker, one of them, to this stupid kid next door. I should have known better because he was such a jerk. And he took a firecracker and he lit it, and then he held it back like here to throw it. And the fuse went so fast, it went off in his hand, and a little bit of it went into his eye. And now, of course, his parents took him to the eye doctor to see what they could do about it. And the doctor was really mad, and he said, "Where did you get the firecracker?" And of course, he immediately said, "Oh, my next door neighbor." And now, all of a sudden, the police are at my door, and they took away the whole carton of. By then, I'd made $50 though, so I was doing pretty well. They took away the whole carton, and I know what now in experience later on in life. They had to dispose of these fireworks because you can imagine how they disposed of them. They took them into their yard and set them off. They weren't stupid. They were dying to get some fireworks also. Thing they didn't get though were the bulldogs, because I'd hidden those in a can out in the woods, and so I could continue to experiment with them. Trying to achieve new and more frightening events as a little kid who should never have had something like that. So moving on to my next job, up until now I'd had 2 of my own businesses, but now my older brother told me that I could have a job where somebody's employing me and they'd be paying us to pick these raspberries. So the deal was you should be there at 8 o'clock in the morning and bring a knapsack with a lunch in it. And you needed the knapsack because you had to carry the empty berry boxes with you. So on Saturday, we each put a sandwich and a drink in the knapsack, and we started out walking to the farm, but it was a couple of miles away, and it was really hot, and I wasn't really very energetic in the morning. So my older brother, 2 years older than I am, got ahead of me, and he managed to get there in time to hear the whole lecture that the owner of the farm was giving everybody. And the first thing he told everybody was that if caught any kid eating a raspberry, that they would get fired. Well, I missed that part, unfortunately. What I got to hear was that we'd be given 20 berry boxes to fill, and we'd be paid 5 cents for each box that we filled. And we should put all the bad berries in the box first, the ones that nobody would want to eat. And then on the top, you put the red ones that really look good. And even as a 7-year-old kid, 8-year-old kid, I thought, well, that is really sneaky. That is the nastiest thing. That's not the golden rule of, kind of thing. That's just cheating everybody. So the owner gave me 20 boxes, and he set me up on a row. And because this is what they were. You could see there's a nice red one there, but there's some that aren't ripe yet, and there's some that are gone over the hill and they're rotten now. And he wanted all those in the box first before you put the good ones in. So I got in an argument with him. I said, I don't want to do that because people, once they eat the good ones, they'll find there's a bunch of garbage in there. He told me, I'm the one who tells you what to do here, and if you want this job, you got to, so on. So I'm a little bit annoyed, but I went right on with it. And so I started picking the berries as fast as I could, and I was getting speared by thorns, and it was very hot, and my arm was bleeding. And I decided to see how bad these other berries tasted, and I ate one or two, and I had to spit it out. It was awful. And then I ate the good one, and I had never had raspberries before in my life. And they were wonderful. I loved them. So next thing you know, I'm picking a raspberry and put it in the box, and I'm putting one in my mouth. And then I look down this long, long row, and this guy is by his pickup truck, and he's got binoculars, and I see he spotted me, and he comes roaring down in his truck, and he jumps out, and he says, "You're fired! I want you out of here right now!" And everybody stopped, and they're all staring at me, and nobody had told me, I weren't supposed to eat the raspberries, so I couldn't figure out what he was talking about. But I could see that he wasn't in a mood to negotiate this with me. So I left, and I felt pretty bad about it. And I thought, my first paying job, and I've already gotten fired. I will go on to say, though, I never got fired from any other job except that one. So I decided I'd take a different route back home, and, partly because it was along the ocean, and so it was a cooling breeze there, and I was so hot. So I'm walking along the railroad tracks on my secret way back, and I come across blackberries, and I mean millions of them there, and they're both sides of the track, and they look delicious. So I ate a couple of them. Oh, they are really good. Well, I had 19 empty berry boxes in my knapsack, so I filled the first one up. And this is my business now. I picked only the very best berries. There wasn't one bad one in there. I wasn't going to cheat my customers, and so on. And then I was, where am I going to sell these? Well, I looked through the berry bushes, and they're about 100 yards away. There are a whole bunch of houses right along the ocean, Narragansett Bay, and they looked like a good place to be customers there. So I managed to get through the briars and everything to the first house, and I knocked on the door, and I told the lady that I was selling blackberries, and they were 5 cents a box. And she said, "Well, let's see what you got." She was suspicious already. She was used to buying them from the store, and there are a lot of bad ones in there. So she dumped the berries in a bowl, and she said, "They're all good berries." "Oh, that's wonderful." He said, "When I buy them in the store, I have to throw out half of them. And they cost 10 cents in the store, and you're delivering right to me, so I should pay you 15 cents a box." So I didn't argue with her. And then she gave me a drink of lemonade, and she asked me if there's more blackberries. Well, you never saw me run so fast in my life. I went through the briars and everything to get back. Took out another box and filled it and brought it into her. But she had already called her next door neighbor, and she said, a cute little boy just sold me some blackberries, and they're the best blackberries I've ever seen. They're much better than the ones in the store. So now the neighbor, she's already selling for me now. I've got a salesperson working for me. So the neighbor said she wanted 3 boxes of blackberries, and so I brought them to her, and I told her that would be a total of 45 cents. And she said, well, I'll just give you 50 cents and keep the change. And then she gave me some ginger ale and a brownie, and she asked me how old I was, and I told her I was 8 years old. And she said, you're a very enterprising young man. And so that night I had my father tell me what enterprising meant. But anyway, well, next thing I know, the word had gotten out in this neighborhood. And back in those days, since they didn't have TV and all this, they were always on the phone, these wives, because the wives didn't work. Their husbands were in the job, and the wives were all talking to each other on the telephone all the time. And so the word had gotten out that I had blackberries and that they were perfect and there weren't any bad ones in the box. So I didn't have to give a sales pitch. The moment I knocked on the door, this young woman would come and she'd say, I want 3 boxes. So I had now the word had gotten out that this was a good deal. Pretty much, I told the final customer now that I only had 1 box left, and that would be it. And she said, well, I don't need the box. I'll just dump it into a bowl anyway. So next thing you know, I'm selling them 1 box at a time to all the other people, and they've already heard about it. So sometimes they'd give me a bowl to fill also. I'd take that over to the blackberries, and you can pick blackberries very quickly because they're large. So it didn't take long to do this. But by the time it got really dark, and I was thinking, oh, my parents are going to get worried about me. I had almost $5, and so this was, back in those days for an 8-year-old kid, this was a huge amount of money. And so when I got home, my father said, where the hell have you been? He said, your brother told me you got fired. He earned 40 cents today, and I want to take him out tonight to get ice cream, but you can't go because you don't have any money. So I hope you learned this lesson. Always do exactly what your boss says if you want to get ahead in the world. And I said to my father, respectfully, I learned a different lesson. The lesson I learned is if you want to get ahead in the world, you want to be the boss. And then I dumped all this money out of my back pocket. And my father said, where the hell did you get that? And I told him about the blackberries and so on. So eventually, I did get to go out for ice cream, and I treated my father to an ice cream cone. Well, the second lesson I learned, in addition to being the boss, that it's much better to be the boss than to work for the boss. Second lesson I learned is the customer is not stupid. They know when they're being cheated, and if you have a good product, the word gets out. And then with me, it did, because they were selling for me. So if you want to have a successful business, you need to have a good product that you're proud to sell, and that people will endorse and actually help you sell it. And that happened to me later on in the space program, when my customers discovered that when I sold something that it met all the specifications, and that I made sure that I had technicians coming out and set everything up properly and so on. The word got out, and near the end of my career, 95% of all the sales of instruments for flight dynamics and everything were from my company. So we've basically taken over the market, and it was in part by having a good product that we followed up on and made sure that it worked, because sometimes there were issues, and then we immediately sent somebody out and made it right. And that added to our costs, but ultimately it meant that the word got out. Near the end of my career, customers would call, and they would say to one of my salesmen, they'd say, "I've been told that the only company I should buy from is Space Electronics. So we would like to buy from you," and blah, blah, blah. It was wonderful to have that reputation in the industry. And that's me at age 8, dressed for church. My brother and I were acolytes, so once we got in the church, we put on these white robes, and we lit the candles on the altar, then we served these little glasses of wine to the congregation and so on. Another unique activity that I had when I was a kid. So my third business is radio repair, and now I'm 12 years old. And of course, back in 1946, it was only AM radio, no FM. And it was the major source of entertainment and news for families. There was no TV, there was no cell phones, there was no computers or internet. So at night, our whole family would gather around the radio, and one of my favorite programs was The Shadow. I don't know if anybody remembers that. Shadow knows. What was it? I used to be able to say it now. Evil. Well, anyway, that kind of thing. And so we gather around and listen to The Shadow. It was about a detective story about a man who could make himself invisible, and he could catch crooks who couldn't see him, which sounded like it would be handy to have. Well, the problem with radios back then, and until transistors were invented, is that vacuum tubes burned out after about a year, just like an incandescent light bulb used to burn out. So when the family radio died, one of the tubes burned out, then they have no entertainment at all at night, and all I can do is fight with each other. So they were frantic to get the radio going again. And this happened to me. I was living in Providence, Rhode Island in the wintertime, and I was on a swimming team at the YMCA, which was right next to a company that repaired radios. And they had another shop right next to them that sold electronic parts. So my father, he knew that I was going downtown. And back then, a 12-year-old boy could go from residential part of Providence, Rhode Island, down to the Y, which is in the middle of a kind of a rough district, all by himself, because you got on the trolley car, and it took you right there. So you just got off the trolley, didn't have to go through any other part of the town, and so my father handed me the radio, and I took it, and I went to my swimming practice, and after that I came out and I went next door to the radio repair, and I handed one of the people at the counter the radio and told him it didn't work, and he started to walk back into his shop, and I said, would you mind if I watched you? I'd love to see how this is done. And because he looked at me, I'm a 12-year-old boy, he figured this kid won't know anything. So I don't mind. You just let him come back with me. So, and I was being as cute as possible, even 12-year-olds, you know how to do that. So I was just calling him sir and everything. He really loved that, very respectful. So I came back, and he took the. Well, when I first got there, there was 3 other guys there, so there were at least 4 of them. It was a big business. There were 4 of them fixing radios. So he unscrewed the cover of the back of the radio, and then he removed the screws underneath, and he pulled the knobs off, which just had friction to slide them on. And then he unplugged the vacuum tubes one by one, and put them on a tube tester, and he discovered that one of them was bad. And I noticed it was a 12AX7, and he replaced it with a new tube. And then he plugged the radio in, and it worked fine. And he put the chassis back in the case and screwed the thing down and popped the knobs back on. And then he charged $5. So I gave him the $20 bill that my father had given me, and I took the $15 and change. But when I got outside in the street, I thought it only took him 15 minutes, and he charged me $5. And what he did was very simple. So the tube must be very expensive. So I thought, I'll find out what it costs. So I went next door to the electronic supply company and asked them how much they charged for a 12AX7, and it only cost 44 cents. So now I can say, whoa, this is a good business. I want to get into this. So I took the $15 I had, and I bought all these different radio tubes. One each, or no, 5 each actually, the ones that were in my radio, but then some other ones that they recommended. And they were trying to help me because they wanted to sell vacuum tubes to me. So they were highly motivated to help me in any way they could. And I got home and I thought, well, I'll just buy a tube tester. But I discovered they were very expensive. And then it occurred to me, I really don't need a tube tester, because I just substitute the tubes one by one on the radio, and when the radio works, I found the one that was bad, and now I'm home free. So I could see we had a business going here. So I asked my father for these purple mimeograph masters that he had, and I wrote Boynton Brothers Radio Repair in big letters and the address and the phone number of our summer cottage where we were going in another week. We were going out there. And my father had his office run off 50 copies of this sign on some very heavy paper. And then when we got to the cottage, I painted a wooden sign that said Boynton Brothers Radio Repair. And back then I was already somewhat of an artist, so I could paint a sign, look just like a professional sign. And I put it up in the front yard. My parents were pretty good to allow me to do this, because some parents would have said, I don't want that in my yard. And then we had a walk-in basement that we weren't even using in this rented cottage we were staying in. So my brother and I set it up like a radio repair shop. We had another sign on the door, and then we had shelves behind the counter, and we needed to have some radios in the shelves to look like we were working on other people's products. So we went to the dump with my father, and there were a whole bunch of radios there that people have just given up on and thrown in the dump. So we picked up all these, brought them back, and put them up on the shelves like these were the ones we were working on. And next thing you know, we looked like we had a radio repair shop. Well, as soon as we put the signs up on telephone poles and everything, we started getting phone calls. And whenever I'd get one, I would tell them to bring the radio to us. And I knew right away that if they thought a 12-year-old boy was going to fix their radio, they wouldn't leave it there. So I pretended that my father was the technician. So I would say, oh, you just missed my father. He won't be back for several hours. But he told me that if you showed up to take some notes about what's wrong with the radio, because usually they just said it just died, I don't know what's wrong with it. And I already knew what was wrong with it. One of the tubes burned out. And sometimes they would say it has a loud hum. Well, I knew that was an electrolytic capacitor because there was a filter system in that filtered the AC ripple out of the high voltage that it was generating. I already had a supply of electrolytic capacitors and ready to go in case anybody had that problem. And then they say, oh, the sound quality is very poor. Well, that almost always, they had cranked the sound up too loud and had torn the speaker by doing so. So we discovered very quickly that we could fix that by taking some blotting paper and putting it where the rip was, and then coating it with aircraft glue, and it would restore the cone pretty well anyway. And now you get the sound again, so we could fix that. And there were a bunch of other simple things that we could, if they're missing knobs or something. Well, by then I had bought different knobs of various kinds for a very cheap price, like 10 cents each or something. And so we could put a new knob on for these people. And all along the part supply company was very enthusiastically working with us because they were selling parts to me. So they were giving me a lot of advice, not only about the parts, but also how to repair various things. Because the guys selling there, a lot of them also worked to repair radios, so they had a lot of experience. And when they knew that we were doing it 40 miles away, so it wasn't competing with them. It didn't take me very long to find out that there were little things that I could do that were so quick. It was just astonishing. So one of the things, I'd take the back off of a radio, and I'd plug it in first, and then unplug it, and take the back off, and I just feel the tubes. Well, if it was a parallel circuit, then one of them would be cold, and the rest of them would be warm. The one cold is the one that had burned out, so I'd unplug it, put a new one in, and literally in less than 10 minutes, the radio was working. Now I put the back on again, and I charged these people $3, not $5, so we get a better deal. But it was $3 for 10 minutes work for a kid that had an allowance of 8 cents a week. So making a lot of money. And now if if all the tubes were in series, that was what was called an AC DC radio. Those were very dangerous because they didn't have a transformer, so that you were connected right to the one part of the voltage was right relative to the ground. So you had to be really careful not to have it plugged in when you worked on it. Those you have to try one tube after the other, but it's still very, very quick. It was usually about 5 tubes. And so you just unplugged one and put a new one in there, and if that didn't work, then you put the old one back in. And then very, very soon you had the radio going again. And now you could charge $3 or $4 for that, so it was a pretty good deal. And if they had a big radio they brought in, then you knew they had a lot of money because those were expensive. So it turned out they're even easier to fix too, because now they had a back you could just take off. You didn't have to remove any knobs or anything, and the tubes were right there. And you went through the same routine and changed the tubes and everything, and then you could charge them $5 But I usually, when I got one, they were filthy inside, so I cleaned it up completely, and I polished the outside of the radio with some kind of wax or something to make it look like a brand new radio. I figured I ought to be giving them something extra here, so when they come pick up the radio, it looks really nice. Oh, what'd you do to it? Well, what I did to it is I polished the veneer. When we were 18 years old, my twin brother and I were the youngest people to get a first-class radio telephone license ever in U.S. history. How did we do that at such a young age? Well, by then, since we had been in the electronics business since we were 8 years old, we had learned a lot about electronics and had been studying it on our own. So we were able to pass this test that was quite difficult. Usually you had to have a college degree in electronics and so on to pass it. So now at 8 years old, we could have started a radio station or a TV station anywhere in the United States. That's incredible to think about. That was the legal requirement in order to start one. My brother, though, was intending to start one, and that is at Brown University, because as a freshman, he discovered that he didn't have a radio station, and he thought that would be a great idea. So he approached them to help him buy the equipment and everything. And it turned out in order To do this, though, legally, he had to have a first-class license, so he went ahead and got it. And when if he was doing it, because we were twins, because he was doing it, I went down and took the test also. I had no reason to do that at all, but we both passed it, so that was good news. I'm always running out of time here, and I've only got 15 minutes. So I'll just continue, and then maybe I'll do another talk if you think it would be worthwhile. If I don't fall asleep. I fell asleep for this one. It was unbelievable. I almost missed this talk. You'd be all sitting here wondering where I was. I actually fell asleep this morning because I'm taking heart medicine, and it's just like a sleeping pill. So if I'm not careful, it knocks me out. Anyway, maybe one or two other stories here. When my mother was 10 years old, she was paralyzed. And I believe now that she had Guillain-Barré because she got fully recovered from it. If it had been polio, she would never have recovered and she would have died. So her father assumed that she had polio. He's on Prudence Island and he doesn't know much about medicine. So he just left her alone in her bed every morning, thinking she was going to die. And he took her twin sister to a private school in Providence, Rhode Island, and she was allowed to room there, to live there. And she went through that school all the way to the 7th grade, so she got a very high-quality education at a private school. And my mother got no education. So, meanwhile, though, my mother read all the textbooks that were in the library in her home. And there was quite an extensive library because her older brother had gone to Yale and so on. She had access to a lot of things she wouldn't normally have. So when she reached the age of 18 and she recovered completely and could walk again, she took the Rhode Island State Teachers Exam and received the highest grade of any applicant in the state of Rhode Island for that year. So now they thought they really had a good candidate. And then they discovered she'd never gone past 4th grade. So now the school board didn't know what to do about that. So they made a special rule for her. She could teach any grade, but it couldn't be above 4th grade. So she either 1st, 2nd, 3rd, or 4th she could teach. But that was fine because she liked 4th grade. And I did too when I was a counselor in camp and everything. The 4th grade kids were really nice. By the time you got 5th grade, the boys were all really wise-ass and arguing with you and everything. So I can understand why she would like 4th grade. So here's a picture of my mother and her twin sister. My mother had a twin sister, but she was a fraternal twin. But they looked a lot alike, and they had a lot of similar abilities. And unfortunately, they had another similar thing, and that is they were both the most aggressive women on earth. And you did not mess with them, I'll tell you. My mother was only 4'10", and nobody dared challenge her. She was so tough, and my Aunt Becky there, she was even worse. She taught me how to swim by throwing me off the end of my dock, not telling me anything about it. She just said, I want you to swim to the shore, which was quite a ways down, and she just took me out and picked me up and threw me in the water. And now I had to figure out how to swim. Well, I did figure out. By the time I got to the shore, I had figured out just how to swim. And I hated her for the rest of my life. But she did some wonderful things. They were going to do some experiments on animals at the end of Prudence Island, where she had lived as a child. It was part of the military program for creating diseases and everything that would affect the enemy. And she single-handedly stopped that by going to the State House and campaigning and getting people to back her and so on. So she really did some very good things. But throwing me off the end of the dock, well, actually, it did teach me to swim. I will say that. And then from then on, I was a pretty good swimmer. So maybe she was all right. But anyway, and my mother, she was so aggressive. It was just unbelievable. But she was brilliant. She did all these amazing things. She created these little. When I was 6 years old, she created a circus in our backyard and had all these kids from the neighborhood acting in different parts, and then she built a marionette stage herself out of wood, and painted it and built the marionettes and wrote the script to it and had all her friends doing the marionettes, and she had young people playing instruments and dressing up in different animals and so on. All of this completely creative on her own, and for no money or anything. She was just interested in giving young people a chance to express a part of themselves that they couldn't in school, where they could, sing and dance and everything. So she was an amazing person, and she invented a system of drying flowers using silica gel. Ended up giving speeches to several hundred people at a time, demonstrating how to arrange these flowers and then how to dry them. And then she sold the arrangements for charity. So she was quite an amazing woman. Anyway, my mother, when she recovered and now was fully athletic again, she got interested in aquaplaning. And in particular, she would stand on the shoulders of a friend of my mother's twin sister. And so the two of them, you can see them here, my mother's on the left, learned to do this. It's amazing, to climb up on the shoulders of somebody on the back of an aquaplane. It's like like water skiing. To have the balance to do that was incredible. Anyway, they decided they were going to have a joint wedding. So my mother married Griswold Boynton, my father, and Aunt Becky married Sidney Airsoff, who was the richest man in Bristol, Rhode Island. He owned the boatyard that made the PT boats and everything. So she became really wealthy. And anyway, she was forced to retire from the public school system at age 65, but she continued to teach as a substitute until she was 80 years old, and her specialty was to restore order in classrooms that were totally out of control. So when they had they're mostly black students who could hardly read, and they were 12 years old, and they had been throwing things at the previous teacher and insulting her and everything. And the teacher would quit. She couldn't stand it. And then they hired my mother to come in. My mother's 4'10", and these black kids are now about a foot taller than she is. And she whipped them in shape so quickly, it was amazing. And the way she did it, you couldn't do it now because now they have all these rules of what teachers have to do. But back in those days, the teacher could do whatever they wanted. So what she would do is she would come into these classrooms where everybody was acting up and teasing the teacher and everything. And she would say to them the very first day, she'd say, what we're going to do, she said, I'm a different kind of teacher. What we're going to do, we're going to put on a show for the whole school, and all of you in this class are going to either play an instrument or you're going to sing. So it's going to be a musical presentation. Well, they love music. She knew that about the black culture. She knew they all loved music and they all were good at it. So now all of a sudden, instead of doing something they hate, they're doing something they love. And then she said, but part of it is going to be, you're going to have to write your part. And your part has got to be about how to read and write, and you've got to do some math in front of the whole school. Well, now they're scared. Oh my God, I'll be in front of the whole school. I don't even know how to write a simple sentence. So all of a sudden, these kids who were acting up terribly were wanting extra help, and were really, really frightened. And oh, this is going to be embarrassing. I can't even write thank you very much or something. Unbelievably, inside of just a year, she turned a lot of these kids around, and they learned how to write, and they learned how to do some math. And years later, a number of them would come to my mother and say, you changed my life. You saved me. I would have ended up on the street selling drugs, and now I'm assistant manager of the grocery store or whatever. So it was wonderful, really, that she did do that. And one of the people she helped became the governor of Rhode Island. And whenever he went by on a parade and he saw my mother standing on the side, he would get out of the parade, come running over, put his arms around her and kiss her, and tell her that she changed his life, and now here he was, the governor of the state. And so it was really quite impressive. So I'm almost at my time limit here. So I'll just have a little quick thing to throw in, and then maybe I'll do another one of these talks if I'm still functional. People always ask me about my identical twin brother, and you can see how much we looked alike. So for me, I have trouble telling which is which. I found, though, that friends of mine can better than I am, because I'm not used to looking at myself, and they're used to looking at me, so they know. But my brother's on the left here, and I'm on the right. But you can see how much we looked alike. And we used to do shows where we did various things where I'd pretend that I was being transported from one end of the auditorium to another or something. It was actually my brother who would come out of the box. And people were always astonished. How did you do that? How did you, Well, it wasn't hard when you had a twin brother. Unfortunately, now we were mirror image twins, which is a twin. If the egg divides within a few minutes, then they're in the same sac, and they're absolutely alike. But if it doesn't divide until I think even a few minutes, then often what you get is a mirror image twin, which is what I was. So my brother was right-handed, and I was left-handed. And I was much more interested in art and music and everything than he was. He was more logical. So we have different personalities in some sense there. Unfortunately, he died in 2024. He got a very rare type of Parkinson's disease, known as progressive supranuclear palsy, and it's like ALS. He couldn't speak, and then he couldn't stand up, and then he couldn't type on a computer, and eventually he couldn't do anything. Incontinent, and he was watching animal shows on the TV, but he retained his mind throughout the whole thing, so he knew exactly what was happening, and it was so frustrating for him that he would, when I visited him, he'd just go, ah, like that, when he was so frustrated he couldn't talk to me. But the interesting thing was, I could read his mind. I knew what he was saying. So they would, his wife would have me come over to visit because he was trying to tell her something and she wasn't getting it. So I'd come, and I don't know how I could do it, but just looking at his face and everything and expressions and moving his lips a little bit, I knew just what he was saying. So I could read his mind, and I would translate for her. And unfortunately, near the end, what he was saying is, I pulled the plug. Pull the plug. This is unbearable. I can't even stand up now, and I'm miserable, and costing you a fortune because he had three caregivers taking care of him, and so that was very sad. But I'm just going to end by showing you the only clip I have ever was one of our tricks where we were pulling out of a box and so on in a show, and for some reason the director wanted us to disclose how we did it, which the magician never tells how he does his tricks. I should never have done that, but anyway, we did that. So at the end of the show, my brother and I came out, and we sang a Doublemint song. There was an ad back in those days that some of you may remember, Doublemint Wrigley Spearmint Gum, and there were two twins singing it. So here is, just for a few seconds, of my brother singing. With double good, double good gum. Double pleasure, double your fun. With double good, double gum. Double your pleasure, double your fun. With double everything rolled into one. Double your pleasure, fun. With double good, double your gum. The same voice, so it's a perfect blend. Another time, and I've got so much more I would like to share with you. So if I'm able to do it, and if you're interested, I would love to do some more of these, but we'll have to see how it goes. Because yes. Well, I got a lot of them from the internet, but I also got a lot of them from a collection I had, childhood and everything, for me, what an emotional experience to open up my chest of drawers where I had all these pictures and everything that I haven't looked at for years. And I'm looking at all these things. Oh my God, did I do that? Who was this person? And it was really an emotional experience for me to basically reliving my life. And as I've said to a number of you before, I'm astonished personally that I was able to do all these different things simultaneously. That I sang in as a folk singer at night, and then during the day I was running a business. And how did I have the energy and the ability to do that? It was really weird. I mean, I was driven to do all these things because I grew up in a family where everybody accomplished enormous things. They all went to Yale and they wrote textbooks, and so it was a sort of the super achiever family that even dating back, I was going to show pictures of a lot of people ask me about my family home here in England, which was built in 1598, and John Boynton was a baron, so he was a member of the royal family, and the king used to stay at his house and so on. I would visit him when I'm young, and he would drive down in a Rolls Royce with a chauffeur driving him to the gatehouse and pick me up, and everybody was frightened of him and everything. So weird, really, to have a relative who was living as like royalty, and then he was telling me how he just couldn't afford to fix up his house anymore, that he spent $1 million just doing the ceiling in the ballroom. I get up to the ballroom, and he's got the biggest collection of Impressionist art in all of England and Europe. Cezanne, and all these other artists. And all these things I've known for years in books that I have, the originals were in his ballroom. So he had quite an unusual life collecting major artworks and so on. And the reason he had the way he got his money to do all this is he actually owned the town where everybody lived. So they all paid rent to him. He owned the entire town, all the stores and coffee shops where they serve liquor and everything. He owned all of that. So everybody paid him rent in the whole town. And then he had a section of his property where he had an industrial park where there were factories, and they paid him rent. So that's how he made his money, and could afford all this. But when he died, he willed the whole thing to the National Trust because it was too expensive, and he wanted other people to enjoy it. So now it's a tourist location, and in some ways the most popular large home that people visit because it's got extensive grounds with gardens and everything, and it's got some buildings that date back to the 1200s that are right on his property. So it's interesting from that point of view also. All right. Anyway, I've already exceeded my time. Thank you very much for coming. I really appreciate it.